Misty said, give her 1 minute.
Nope. 10 o'clock, time to go.
Sorry, Misty, you don't have that option.
Hold on, I gotta get this on Do Not Disturb.
Hey, there's Amanda and Sherry and Jade, TJ and Retha. That's all I can see right now. And Sally, I can see Sally.
Whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay.
We're ready when you are, Miss McCarty.
Okay, so we're going to talk about mental illness today and how it affects the family. And one of the things is, what I've been doing some research, I found that 1 in 5 Americans is suffering from some form of mental illness. And I've got some therapists on here, and if you agree, shake your head. But 1 out of 5 Americans are suffering from some form of mental illness. And when we talk about mental illness, for those of us in the field, the ones who, actually do the diagnosing, we have what is called a DSM, and now it's called DSM-5. It's a diagnostic tool that has every mental disorder, addiction, disorder of any sort that anyone might have is in there, and it is updated periodically as it changes, or they change the name of certain diagnosis. But anyway, that's really where we get the diagnosis for certain mental illness and addictions. And there's over 300 mental illnesses and disorders. And included in that is, which we knew, or I knew, is addictions, drug addiction, alcoholism, and food disorders is included in that over 300 mental illness diagnoses. And, those of us as addicts, whether we like it or not, we have a mental illness. We do have a mental illness. And it's like any other disease. It has to be treated, and it's much like diabetes. You don't get over it. I mean, you can live in recovery every day for the rest of your life if you treat it, but you've got to continue to treat it. And that's true for mental illness. So I want to kind of focus on mental illness because, and I can't focus on that without talking about addictions, mental illness and disorders. But I want to kind of give you three things that you look for that happens in families. 3 things that happens. One of the things is mental illness often becomes the family's primary focus. The mental illness, and that's like addiction or the mental illness, it becomes the primary focus. Well, looky there is Miss Emma all the way from Pennsylvania. Good to see you, honey. And John, and there is Bonnie Bag, and there's Eva. Oh, we got a new one, Eva and John. All right, it's good to see all of you. Joseph, on and up. So the top 3 things is mental illness often becomes the family primary focus because the one that has the disease, regardless of what the illness is, that's where all the focus goes. And then the second thing is different members of the family will have different perceptions of the illness. One won't see it as very bad, and one will see it as, particularly parents, if they have a child or a teenager that is showing mental illness, signs of mental illness. Sometimes one parent will, out of their own pride or out of their own, perhaps mental illness, do not want to recognize the mental illness in the child. And so that puts the burden on the other parent to have to do double work until both parents can get to the same conclusion that there's a problem here. And if it is a parent, sometimes so much like addictions, the spouse of a person that has mental illness, a lot of times will go down and bond with the children, particularly the oldest one, not all the time, but for comfort or for just be able to have a conversation with someone that doesn't have mental illness. Another thing that we see, and that I've researched it, a lot of times children of mentally ill people will not, and spouses, they won't have the brain chemistry of a mental ill person. And this is the tricky part. But they can have what we call situational depression and anxiety. It's situational. It may not be the brain chemical, clinical type, but it is people get anxious, they get depressed when living with someone mentally ill. I mean, it can bring the whole system down. So another thing, what happens with family members and the caregivers is feelings of helplessness. It's like, what can I do? That feeling of absolute helplessness. You know, I felt that with my mother. I know today, I suspect, I don't know for sure because my mom's dead and gone. I knew mother was a prescription drug addict and an alcoholic, and she stayed home and slept and, wore out couches and was sick all the time. But I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, hers started with mental illness. You know, her father had mental illness. It does run in families. And I think that what I make up today, that mother did have mental illness, and we didn't have the medication back then that we have today. And so I believe that mother started self-medicating through prescription drugs. And back then you could doctor shop and go from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor. But I remember early on in the addiction field where we have a system now that you can't do that. If the system really works, you can't, go from doctor to doctor because everything is online. So anyway, the thing about, there's just such a feeling of helplessness that the family members have, and then a lot of frustration, and then there's a lot of loss, loss of companionship a lot of times. And then there is also guilt. There's a lot of guilt that, the family feels like that they can't do anything or something to help the person that has the mental illness. And then they have what we call compassion fatigue. They've just been so compassionate till they've wore themselves out. Compassion fatigue, and they take on the burden of the mental illness. And we want family members, regardless of what the illness is, to support each other, not support the illness, but support the person who has it and help hold them accountable. And that's something that family members don't do. I don't know what the reason is that they don't hold mentally ill people accountable. And I don't know. And really in addictions, sometimes, family members, spouses, particularly in addiction, disorders, families make lots of threats and don't follow through with them. If you get drunk one more time, I'm leaving you. Or if you get in jail one more time, blah, blah, blah. And what family members need to do is make promises and keep them, because whether a person's mentally ill or suffering from an addiction, if they have any, depending on the level of that mental illness, most people with mental illness can have a clarity about what they need to do for themselves. And if the family takes it on, you cripple the mentally ill person, whether it's an addict or someone with mental illness. So number two, one of the things, like I said, number one is the focus. The whole focus of the family gets on the mentally ill. And we've treated a lot of people that have come out of that family system. And maybe there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 children, and there'll be maybe one mentally ill child, and all the focus goes on that mentally ill child. And you know, the people who come into us, they either are coming in for codependency issues, or, you know, or they have their own addiction or something, but they are angry people, because a lot of times it's all the energy went to the mentally ill person, and it's hard to divide that energy. I'm with you, I know that. So number 2, family members have, like I said, different perceptions of the problem. And depending on who, you know, the age of the kids, and the, you know, whether it's the spouse or something. And so there'll be different conflicts about the solution. You know, and what'll happen so many times then, when there is a definite solution for mental illness, and then the mentally ill person doesn't want to follow those directions, there's some things the family can do. There's some things the family must do. And so, all right, what happens then is, I kind of got off track here, but I'm back on track now. So go back to for things that you can do for yourself. What you can do for yourself if you have an addict in the family or a mentally ill person, what you can do for yourself is ask for help for yourself. Get help for yourself from friends, but be sure and get friends that are not, won't just bless your heart, you know, how awful it is, and make you feel even worse. Try to find someone that really has an understanding of maybe what you're going through. You know, so friends, your pastor, if you're involved in a church, by all means, you know, seek out help in the church. Sometimes churches will have support groups for the mentally ill that go as a caregiver and talk to the pastor for you, not for your loved one. And then see a doctor. Go see a doctor. A lot of family members, and I keep saying, including people with, you know, family members of, you know, addicts and people with eating disorders, they let their own health go, their own physical health go. And of course, you know, they'll take that addict or that loved one to the doctor whenever, but they won't take care of themselves. So get a good physical checkup, take care of yourself, and then get a counselor, your own counselor. And it's advisable to get a counselor, you know, because therapists and counselors are trained in different, they have different expertise. Make sure that who you're seeing understands the mental illness that your loved one has, because if they don't, they could be kind of prejudiced. But anyway, and so, you know, you go shopping for groceries, go shopping for a therapist. Don't just, you know, fall for the first one. Check out what their belief system is and their education on treating the mentally ill, and also the family members. And then with every mental illness across the United States and addiction, there are support groups. Find them, find you a support group. There is nothing like the language of the heart. You know, when you talk with someone that has the same problem that you do, it's, you know, it goes from your heart to another person's heart. They understand. When you talk to someone that doesn't understand, you know, what comes from the head goes over the head, and they have no clue what you're talking about. You know, and you may educate yourself, you know, on the disease and the, you know, the addiction and the mental illness, and you might wear your friends out about talking about your loved one that has mental illness, but find someone who understands, that has lived that. I was asking Misty just now if she would be willing to let me share a little bit of her story about living with someone that's mentally ill. And she gave me permission. Will you lean over here and tell them that I'm not making this up?
She has permission.
Because when I moved to this community almost 8 years ago, I met Misty first and later met her husband. And I don't know if y'all know the story. And by the way, her and her husband have spoke to large congregations, I mean, thousands of people about this problem. And so it's not like we're saying something about the mentally ill person without them being here, because they have, or go out and really speak. So it might help someone dealing with the same problem. So like I said, we had moved here in about 6 months or so. I mean, they had moved here in about 6 months or so into our friendship. We all went on a hayride. It was during Halloween. I had not met her husband. And so he sat right next to me. Everyone else except my daughter Kim and I were family members. Everyone on that, that wagon were family members. They had, in-laws, outlaws. They all knew each other for years and years and years. We were the newbies on that wagon ride. So I sat next to Chris, her husband, and someone mentioned some kind of movie. And from the time that wagon started moving, we went all over town and up the hill and down the hill and came back. That entire time he talked to me about movies. He rattled it off. He could tell you every movie since the 1940s, 50s, 60s. He could tell you the script. He could tell you the dialogue, and he'd give you the dialogue and the dialect. I mean, he had it down in his brain. And I looked around at the people on that wagon, and other than Kim, my daughter, all of them were looking up and around and rolling their eyes. They had lived with Chris like that since he had been a youngster. And I think his grandparents maybe tried to get him help, but no one could find anything. I mean, they could not get to the root of the problem. But when Kim and I got off of the wagon, and we started home, I looked at her and she looked at me, and I said, he's on the spectrum. And I said, I would suspect he has Asperger's. My license does not qualify me to diagnose anyone with Asperger's, but my intellect does. I mean, it was like sitting next to the Rain Man, if y'all ever saw that show. He did numbers, Chris does movie scripts and titles, and he watches lots and lots and lots and lots of movies, and he has a memory for that, like an elephant, you wouldn't know. So I didn't know them very well, and so I didn't want to just go right out and diagnose him. But Misty and I became friends, and I did tell her, I said, I have a very big concern about your husband, and I think that he has Asperger's. And long story short, both of them followed some directions. He went, we encouraged him to go to a psychologist here that specializes in testing. And he tested him, and he told Chris, he said he did not know how he had survived, am I saying this right, all of the years without being diagnosed, and the burden that he had carried and his wife, because the behavior of an Asperger's person, their frustration gets so high, and they will have outbursts of anger and rage. And it goes to the spouse or the closest one to them. And, they didn't have children for the first 7 years. And usually the Asperger's person won't get as bad. I mean, they're bad enough, but they don't, like one time they were going somewhere. I mean, and he's an evangelist. They would go out and preach. Every weekend she did the music and he would preach. Wonderful. When he gets on that podium, another part of his brain works. I mean, you cannot tell that man has a thing wrong with him. He is one of the best ministers, the best speakers, and the best evangelist I have ever heard. But when he walks off that podium, he goes nuts. He turns into a different person, or used to. He doesn't anymore because he's working hard at it. And he would take it out on Misty. Either she wasn't paying attention, or maybe the other people wasn't paying attention and they didn't like it. All of that self-talk, they'd start with the self-talk and then they verbalize it to the closest one. And he got so angry, he busted out the windshield. And what the spouse does a lot of times is much what Misty did, particularly the type of business they were in. They were in, religious business. I mean, they were evangelists and they went literally all over the world and not just the United States. So she was the symptom barrier. She kept the secret for all of those years. The only ones that really knew, and they didn't know the whole picture, that was her mom and dad. And the others, really, she kept it a secret. And she put up with a lot of abuse from Chris, and so did the children. And so what's happening with their older son now is for the first, after they had their first child, it was 7 years before they had another child. And so that first one, they were doing all of that traveling, and he absorbed all of that behavior. He's been tested. He does not have Asperger's, but he has situational. This is what I'm calling situational. He has developed mental health disorders due to living with someone, an untreated mentally ill person. Now he's getting help. Misty's getting help. They're ready to get help for the younger children. But this is why I'm doing this morning, we must get mental illness out of the closet and talk about it. You know, used to, it was alcoholism that no one wanted to talk about. I mean, it was just doom and gloom if you were an alcoholic. You know, it has almost been, a status symbol now. People in Hollywood, I mean, everywhere, they're not afraid to come out and say, I'm an alcoholic. And that's good. That's what we have wanted. We've normalized the disease to where it gives people, and eating disorders is coming along, but giving people, the permission to go for help. Mental illness must get on this level, because family members particularly have a lot of shame around living with a mentally ill person. Y'all hear us talking about carried shame. That's what Misty carried. She carried the shame of her husband and his behavior, and their older son has. Now, we don't know about the younger ones, but I'm glad that Misty gave me permission to share this, because they really didn't know that their older son had been affected, and it is really coming to light. He is seeking help. He's seen a psychiatrist, has a diagnosis, is on medication. And so, all right. So I kind of got off on a rampage there. But if you are living with a mentally ill person, and if you're a spouse of one of the things you must do is to work on your relationship at the level that the other person can. Spend time together, because if you're married like Misty, they were married at 19. She was 19, he was 20. And he had Asperger's then, and she knew that he was quirky, so it's manifested itself through the years. And everyone got used to Chris's quirkiness. He can't stay in crowds. He can't stay in noise. He can't stay in music. She loves music. He can't stay in it unless he's singing. That sensory overload is so bad. And so once both parties start getting some help, then it's time to really look at the relationship and spend time together at the level that the spouse can. You may not want to spend a lot of time with your mentally ill spouse, and that your mentally ill spouse needs to understand that on their level of understanding, because a lot of times they want to take the spouse hostage or the children hostage, and they want them all by themselves. This reminds me of and they're all gone. I can talk about them. They're all dead now. But years ago, before I ever went into the field, there was a family in Abilene, Texas, that their father had been a Vietnam vet. He had PTSD. That's mental illness, undiagnosed, untreated PTSD. And he got his family inside a house, and he barricaded them in the house and kept them there for 1 week. we didn't have all the news stations and all we have now. We had newspapers. And so the Associated Press picked up on this. It went worldwide because he had kept his family captive in the house. Now it was all over the news and all over that. And so years later, I come to know the younger son that was in there, the younger one. And the others had grown up and had, become professional. And he was a professional. But I got to know them, him and his wife, through church. And then I'm not going to go into it, but by that time I was a therapist, a counselor, and I knew that young man was in big time trouble. And because he was good in the community and at his job and at one of the universities and in church, and he was well loved and all, his wife hid the trouble from everyone. His parents had already passed away. His mom and his dad had already passed away. And so the wife took all of that on. I won't go into all of the details, but what this man started doing, and they were pretty wealthy, and he started shoplifting and hiding stuff in their attic. What I make up about that is he wanted to get caught. So on a certain level, he wanted help. So that's what happened was he started shoplifting. Long story short, the man, he was in a car wreck, but it was really called suicide. He pulled over in front of an 18-wheeler. They don't know that it was suicide, but that's what they believe that it was. That is due to untreated mental illness that he carried from his father all those years. So let's get it out of the closet. Let's start talking about mental illness and get, so, for the family then, for the spouse is learn about the diagnosis, learn everything you can about the diagnosis, and also learn everything you can, help your spouse get help, good help. And remember, it's not a one-time shot. This is going to be continuous. It's going to be like diabetes. It's not one and done. You have to treat it daily, weekly, daily, with medication. A lot of people with that are mentally ill that have mental ill diagnosis, bipolar for one. What we say is take your meds. If a bipolar person will take their meds, they can live a full life. But what happens, and we treat them all the time, and they usually come in presenting with addiction of some sort, and then they'll either already be diagnosed with bipolar or it will be diagnosed. And the reason they get off their meds is because your bipolar people like the high that they have. And they love that high. Boy, they're, and then when they're on, but when they have the high, then they have a severe low. And that's when, everyone suffers. And that's when the suicide comes in and all of that. And so the best thing that the family can do is encourage, insist on them taking their medication. Because if they don't, they will not be able to live any sort of a normal life. And I don't care what the diagnosis is. If you're prescribed meds, thank God that there is something today to help that brain chemistry. And don't be ashamed to take it. Don't be embarrassed to take it. Okay, I've got to hurry up along here. But learn about the diagnosis, and then also with that, make it your place, with going with your spouse or your family member. Find out what the treatment program is or the treatment plan and go with them on those treatment plan updates. And you can help support them and keeping on their plan. And back to my friend here. And I won't go into, Chris got willing to do anything that was recommended. I didn't want to be involved in his treatment because I'm a friend. I'm a friend of Misty, so I didn't want to be involved. But we made lots of referrals. Chris did everything that we recommended for 2 years, I think 2 solid years. even his oldest son that's having problems now, he said, I love to see Dad sit and write at the table. He was writing the steps. He had a step sponsor in CODA. CODA helps mentally ill people. Codependency meetings helps mentally ill people. And his son said he got so much better. And then what happened, I don't know if he thought he was well or what, but he quit it. And pandemic, that's a lot, meetings dropped off to none. And gradually, little by slow, he creeped back into the symptoms. And there's a lot of shame with admitting, that. So what, I'll get into that, is what to do is I want to skip down here and tell you this. Have a basic plan of action for mental health emergencies. I mean, this is so important, and we've just come through that. I say we because I support Chris and Misty in this and their whole family, and they have gone through a relapse with Chris here lately, and that happened twice before. And what happened is he agreed to have a support system, and that support included Kim and myself, and that supported not his therapist but his friends. That included her mom and dad and his mom and dad from Austin. So twice we had to intervene. We brought, called in the troops and had like an intervention. And what he did, he got right back on track, started back doing what he was doing, and results were shown. And then again, he got back off track. And when that happens is, one of the most important things that I want to talk about is have a basic mental health emergency plan. Like if they get suicidal, or if they start raging, or if they start that physical or verbal abuse is enough, if they start, reach out to a mental health facility. And if you can't get them there by yourself, call the sheriff's department or the police. They will transport the mentally ill person to a safe place. And, they'll go into, we have one here called Oceans, and they'll usually stay 7 days. And it's usually a real reevaluation for meds. They've either quit taking their meds or they need to change the meds. But have a plan, a mental health emergency plan. And that's where you have friends like all of us, call us, and we're Kim and I kind of this last resort, because we scare the ever living life out of Chris. He will straighten up. We just walk in the room half the time. And we love the man. He's a precious man. He's a good person. But when he gets into his Asperger's rage, and then he gets very childlike, and you can't tell the children from the adults. And so the kids take it, like his older son takes on that parent role, and all. So it gets real messy with families. And so have that emergency plan. And then I'm going to go back to this because it's so important. Encourage the member to follow through with therapy recommendations. And if you have to, go with them, because I will tell you, mentally ill people don't always like to follow through with the directions. And if they go by themselves, they'll come home and lie to you because they don't want to do those things. Or maybe they don't want to take the medication because it changes the way they feel. And so a lot of times that medication has to be worked with a very good psychiatrist. Now it takes a psychiatrist, and I'm really big on this. I think a good psychiatrist to diagnose mental illness. But then it takes good therapists to do the therapy work, and they work hand in hand. You need a team, a whole team. But I'm big on having a psychiatrist. Most psychiatrists I've never seen, I won't say never, but psychiatrists don't do the therapy work. They do the medication, and that's what they're trained to do. And they keep up with the newest, and they know the side effects, and they know what to watch for. And keep those appointments and go with your mentally ill person. And they may not want you to do it anyway, at least once a quarter. And if you see a problem, go more often. But they need to be going weekly, I think, for the rest of their lives. They need to keep in contact with a therapist every week, every other week on a regular basis. And then again, I can't stress enough, take the meds, take the meds, take the meds. And they'll say things, well, like it's run out and I didn't know that it ran out. Now, codependency can come in here. If your loved one that has mental illness, if they're not capable of getting those prescriptions filled themselves, fill them for your own self-preservation. Fill them. Do what you can. But it really needs to be put on them as much as it can be. And so another thing, express your anger in a compassionate, your frustration and your anger in a compassionate and a constructive manner. And work on, until you're a mentally ill person is, work on being sad instead of mad. You have a right, if you have a mentally ill person, they have a right and you have a right to feel some sadness about that, because it's something they didn't ask for. It's something you didn't ask for. And so many of these mental health diagnoses don't show up till midlife. And so it's nothing anyone asked for, but it's okay to be sad about it. And then grieve the losses. You'll go through a grief process, grieve the losses, and you may go up through them over and over and over, especially when they start doing better and your hopes get up. And then all of a sudden, they want to quit doing anything. And you just feel like, here we are back to square one. And this is where the family has to look and make some big, strong decisions. I am never, can you hear me? I never, ever promote divorce or separation. But sometimes if the situation calls for it, as far as your own mental health or your own physical health and protection of your children, you might have to have a separation for a while, or even have a legal separation. It may not even come to divorce. I don't know, but you've got to have some self-preservation first for you and your children, and confront them to the level that they can be confronted. I'll tell you, mentally ill people like to use, they will use up people. They will use up, and what I mean by this, they use their mental illness to not have to really show up like they would. And we see it all the time in treatment. They use it. They'd rather be mentally ill. Well, I can't do that. You challenge them, and it's amazing what mentally ill people can do. I don't care what the diagnosis is. Now, yeah, there are limitations, but don't put those limitations on the person. Encourage them, and don't put up with their BS about not doing treatment, and then learn to live with them at the level, you'll know pretty much how far they can go in their recovery. And then it's not that you're settling, when they don't take action to recover and you stay with them, you're settling to live in a mess. When they won't take the action, because you cannot take the action for them, they must take the action. But then after, they are on the road of recovery, and you both will kind of get a sense of, maybe this is going to be it. Maybe this is as much as they're going to recover. Accept it, and love them where they are, quirks and all, because there is some love in your heart for them, or you wouldn't be with them in the first place. So, all right. And then here you can kind of do a little bargaining, and we don't bargain with addicts. None of us get to bargain about our disease, whether we stay sober or stay in our eating disorder. You're either doing it or you're not. But for mentally ill people, accept partial solution when they occur. Celebrate every little milestone. And it's not like that you're saying this as far as you can go, but accept where they are at the time, those partial, if they're willing to do one thing, support them in doing that, but then they need to go to the next level and the next level. So support them where they are. And be realistic in your expectations and focus on your energy, not theirs, focused on your energy. And do what you can do, and I've already said this, do what you can do to educate yourself about the limitations of your loved one. Educate yourself about their limitations. And then one problem, and I've gone over it, I'll go over it again. One problem that happens with family members, they get tired of helping the mentally ill person be hold to that. And they let they all settle, and then they get back in the ditch, all of them. So hold them to the level of where they are, of what they're capable of doing, and see for yourself to settle for less. So, in all ways, when in a dangerous situation, remove yourself from it. This is something that I want to give you that y'all, when I look on here, all of you know this, but I want to reinforce it. Take care of yourself. And these are basic things. Use prayer and meditation. I said medication. You might need medication yourself. But anyway, prayer and meditation every day. Seek God's help every day. Practice mindfulness, really stay focused on what's at hand. Don't get way over there in the future. And then, do things like relaxation techniques. Go outside and sit in the sun. Take deep breathing. Just take deep breaths. And all of you know this, exercise, and get your mentally ill person to go join a gym with you, and you all exercise together. That is some of the best ways to those endorphins to kick in. That's their, our own natural chemicals. Get regular sleep. And sometimes if your loved one is in what I call like an episode, if they're in a down spiral or whatever, give yourself a favor. Take you and your kids and go somewhere overnight, or take your children to your parents or a babysitter, and you go get in a hotel room and sleep and rest if it gets that bad. Take some time off, a day, 2 days. Take care of yourself, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to help anyone, let alone yourself. Eat nutrition food. Eat, feed yourself 3 balanced meals a day and maybe a snack at night. And then practice constructive self-talk instead of getting into that negative talk of, oh, woe is me, it's never going to be any better, and not I'm doomed for this. Say things to yourself like, I can get through this. We can get through this. Say it to yourself. We're going to get through this bad time. We're going to get through it. I can get through it. And with God's help and help of friends and good mental health providers, we're going to get through with this, get past this. And another thing, when you start living in wellness and your mentally ill person starts getting better, volunteer and for that particular mental illness that your loved one has. Force insurance companies, if you have to hire a lawyer, do whatever you can to get insurance to pay for mental illness. They need to pay for mental illness on the same level as they pay for physical illness. So with that, I have stopped sharing and gone to preaching. I'll get on my soapbox with that, because we must do whatever we can with our Congress, with our representatives, with whoever you have any influence on. Mental health must be funded on every level up to the same amount that physical illnesses are financed. because that keeps a lot of people from help, is having financial stability. I mean, enough to pay for treatment. And a lot of times, if both of them are working and that they're making ends meet and they're taking care of themselves financially, but if their insurance won't pay, and they make just enough to not qualify for any of the services in town, that's the group that's suffering the most, is the one that they have a little bit too much money, but not enough to take care of their mental illness. So it is a problem, that inside every problem, there are solutions. So I'm going to open it up to all of you and share. And I've got some on here, and I'd like to
Sally, then Megan.
Sally and Megan, and then, okay, then Michelle, okay.
I know for me, and I don't keep it from anybody that, you know, that I am clinically depressed and borderline bipolar. I just wish that my parents, especially my dad, wasn't so against medical professionals, because I didn't realize this until, gosh, maybe about a year ago, that I think a lot of times for me when I was younger, it was just assumed I was having a tantrum. And I think some of those tantrums weren't tantrums. It was where I was having a bipolar flare. And unfortunately for me, I didn't get diagnosed or on any medications until I was in my early 30s. And so, but yeah, it's important. And I know, like, I've got myself a support system and everything, because it's really important. And I tell my friends and everyone, I say, if you see me and if I'm just so depressed, or if I'm just in an irate state or whatever, you know, they know to call someone, they know to call a certain person who knows to call for my, you know, to get me in for in the hospital or the therapy, something quick. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we have to have that, particularly when you live alone.
Yeah.
All righty. Thanks so much, Sally. And I want to recognize Serena. Hello. It's good to see you. You're beautiful as ever.
Thank you. It's good to
Good
see you.
to see you. When are you coming back to see us?
It depends on my work schedule, mainly because I had today off work. Normally I work at 8 a.m. to 4 on Wednesdays, but yeah.
All
Sorry.
right, well, come when you can.
So,
and if you need to come back, we're here. Good to see you. And that goes for everyone. It's good to see you. Good to see you.
Yep. Thank you.
All righty, Megan.
Hi, Betty. Can you hear me?
I can. How are you? You're driving. All righty.
I am. I'm on my way to a pretty exciting meeting, which I can tell you about later. But I thank you for this today. It was really helpful. Bodhi has just come back from spring break on 9 days with his dad and hasn't had his medication for 9 days. And it's hell. And I don't know what his dad has said to him, but now he doesn't want to take his medication. And so that, you know, when you're talking about parents having differing opinions about it, it makes it impossible for me. And so me having my support system and being stronger than ever in my recovery is the only way for me to deal with it. And so I wanted to say thank you to Misty, because I noticed on her Instagram that sometimes she puts up the affirmations and that there's an app called I Am. And I got that app and I have it set up so that every hour I get an affirmation, I get a notification with an affirmation. And that has been just that small change has made such a difference in my day. I mean, obviously prayer, meditation, meeting, sponsor, working the steps, therapy, psychiatrist, medication, all of it. But I feel like those affirmations have made a really big difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not
Well,
gotten any easier.
and I know you've gone the legal route, you've done everything, but it just seems like that there's could be some, you live in a different part of the country, that it just seems like that the legal system could hold his feet to the fire some way, but so far they haven't been able to, have they?
Right. Nope. But we are about to start exploring that route again, given some other things that have come up that came up over spring break. So I'm meeting with the attorney this week.
Great. Keep fighting for your son. And I know you have since the day you took his first breath. All righty. Love you, Megan.
Okay.
Thanks.
Love you.
Miss Sherry. Sherry.
It's actually gonna be my daughter, and her nickname is Ange.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to say my heart goes out to everyone here. I love all of you, and I love you, Tennie, because you have saved lives. You are saving lives, ma'am.
All righty. Well, thank you. It's good to see both of you. Bye-bye. Good to see you. Okay. Sherry.
Yeah.
There you are. How are you this morning?
Hi there. I'm doing pretty good,
Good.
but I have a kind of a backward question maybe to what you said.
Okay.
Well, I am seeking help, and so I will admit I am the one that has the problem. But if you're, and you know this from firsthand, if the family chooses not to seek help themselves, what is it that I can do? Because even the therapist talked to me last week because I did some writing. And in the writing, when I got through writing, I put at the bottom, but I can't let my family see this. And she said, well, as long as you keep your family out of the loop, you're robbing yourself of joy.
Yeah. Good for her. Good for her.
And I said, so how do you go about, or how do I go about doing that? I mean, if they won't, I've talked about reading my autobiography to them, and my girls are open to that. I'm not sure about my husband, but because I admit I do have a problem, and I want them to be part of it so we all can heal.
Well, one thing I would recommend is, and I'm going to say this, your sister Diane just had severe heart surgery. She's been very ill.
Right.
And she's gotten support. You've rallied around her, the family has. So I would come from that and talk to your family about mental illness, but I wouldn't do it alone. You need a therapist. The therapist, see if she would be willing to meet with y'all. And because you need to have that backup support. And your family system, all of us have family systems that are different, but yours is different. And one of your daughters is a professional in the field, and so it's it's a hard question to answer, Sherry, but I do think that they need to hear, they need to know, because you have grandchildren that you love and adore, and this disease can be passed down from generation to generation. And I think, what I say is we're sick as we are secret. I think we need to throw everything out there. That's what Kim says, to throw everything out there, all of the problems with the family and all, and sort through it, take out what doesn't work and keep the rest. And that's why we do Family Week. And, and your family wasn't willing to do that. And it really saddens me. We had a family week 2 weeks ago and just saw miracle after miracle after miracle. We do it every family week. Because it's just a place for people to tell the truth. Your family needs to know how much you've suffered. You've suffered a lot, Sherry, and you've carried it. You and your sister pretty much have carried it. And so I would support you in talking to your therapist about having a meeting with the family. And, you know, if you had any other disease, if you had cancer, I mean, you've had other, didn't you have cancer at one point? Maybe
No,
not. But if you
I've
had,
been pretty healthy.
but if you
I had
had some,
COVID.
if you had some physical disease that was life-threatening, they would rally around you. And they need to do it with this mental illness. You need more support than you have, Sherry. So go back to the therapist and see if she would be willing to meet with y'all, and then invite everyone.
Feels like I'm still it still feels like I'm keeping a secret. That's the way it feels. But the secret is still,
And you need to tell the secret.
Yeah.
I
mean, I've told it to y'all. Oh, I do. And you know, she just reiterated what you'd been trying to do by telling me that. And of course, I'll ask her. I see her tomorrow, so I will ask her if she'll do that.
In my own life, you know, there was so much shame around the abuse that I didn't tell anyone. And when I did, everyone was relieved. It's like, because on a certain level, they thought they'd done something, you know, from my kids to my husband. And, you know, once the secret got out, it's like, oh, okay, you know. So I feel like they will be relieved, but I'd really encourage you to hold their feet to the fire. And because they love you, your kids love you, Sherry. It's not that they don't love you. They just have that fear. They have fear of, you know, their mama just going completely off. I don't know what their fear is, but talk to your therapist. And, you know, if she wants to talk to me, I'd be glad to, if you would sign a release, you know. So keep us posted. Love you.
I will.
All right. Good to see you. Bye-bye. All right, Emma.
Hi. So I can talk about going off my meds and kind of, I never used my mental illness as an excuse. I don't think. I have ADHD and anxiety and depression, for those of you who don't know, but I always wanted to be seen as normal. I didn't want to use it as a crutch. I actually, in high school, I just graduated last year, and I denied almost every kind of extra support that was offered to me because I didn't want to be seen as abnormal or needing help. I wanted to be good on my own. So I don't know. I always have felt a little bit of irritation to when people use their mental illnesses as a crutch and an excuse, because I know what people can do, and it makes people, it can cause people to think about other people with mental illness as incapable or less than, or that they can't do, and underestimate people. But actually I've begun to love when people underestimate me so I can prove them wrong. And but I went off my meds for about 5 months. Basically after I left Shades the first time, I went off my meds. And it was not good, because I realized that my meds stable me out. And as much as I hate taking them, they are like, I just want to live my life without meds every day. But if I had something like heart disease or cancer, I would take them every day.
You would.
I would. So why am I not doing that with my brain? I don't know. But as soon as I get stable, I go off them. And I don't think it's because I love the high, because I don't have bipolar or anything like that. I just don't like doing anything that makes me feel like not a normal teenager. But I'd rather be not a normal teenager and be an extraordinary teenager. That's my new mindset.
Good. I want to tell you, Emma, you sound like a grown-up today.
Thank you.
You sound like a grown-up, and my hat's off to you. Now, the thing about taking meds, all it does, it doesn't spike you up or let you down. It brings you up to baseline. It just, you know, whatever normal is, it makes us more normal, you know, brings us up to baseline. So keep doing what you're doing. You did some great work here, and keep growing yourself up. And don't forget that little girl on the inside, and keep dancing. Let her dance. Love you.
Love you.
All righty, George.
Hello, everyone. My name's George Armstrong, and I'm an alcoholic and have an eating disorder. And Tennie, thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for this topic. I have some experience with my daughter, her mother. We split up when she was a child, when Molly was a child. It's my daughter, Molly. But Susie, her mother, had a catatonic bipolar. It was bipolar that really kind of presented like catatonic schizophrenia when she was younger, but she spent a significant amount of time on medication, and we never. I guess I left it up to Susie to talk to Molly about it, and she never did. And so when Molly was a freshman in high school, Susie was off of her medication and had an experience. And it was really a tough deal because Molly was the oldest and the basically the caretaker in the house when that happened. And so I would have loved for her to be on this talk, but what was really interesting was the shift that Molly's approach to her mother had because of this, because of the episode. She went from being so much of a daughter to being more of a caretaker kind of thing. And that relationship is still, that's kind of how it is still today. And it's never, my daughter now is 20 and she's off at college, but there's that piece of it where Molly doesn't want to get too far from her mother because she feels like she would need to, jump in a moment's notice if something like that happened. And it's really interesting because my role in it is to try to just foster conversation between her and her mother when Molly and I are together, just to to make sure that kind of that mother-daughter relationship stays in place. But it's really, it was a great topic, and I didn't fully even think through that piece of it until, I heard you really going through it, and I really, really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you.
All righty, yeah, I can hardly wait to see you in person. Yeah, and this is where family meetings, I know that it's hard to set up family meetings, but if you have a mentally ill person in the family or an addict, family, and where there's children involved, have those weekly family meetings. Give the children a voice. Tell them the truth. Kids can handle the truth. What they don't know, they have to make up. And usually they make up there's something wrong with them, that they're causing this. And, I can identify with Molly in that I was my mother's caretaker until I was 32 years old, and I could not do it anymore. And I had little kids, I had big kids, little kids. We had 7 kids, alcoholic husband. And anyway, I surrendered my mother and I stopped the caretaking. And, I just knew that she would die because she told me she would if I didn't take care of her, and she lived to be 87. So it didn't mean that I completely ignored her. I would treat her. I had to figure out what a dutiful daughter would do for any, mother-daughter relationship and not overdo that. And but I had to do that so I feel good about myself. So thanks, George. Look forward to seeing you. All right. So next week, would you like to talk about how to keep your acceptance level higher than your expectations?
Yes.
Anybody have high expectations? All right. That's what we're going to talk about. How to keep your acceptance level higher than your expectations. And there's Miss Taylor Crenshaw from Houston. I asked him about you. How are you doing? There you are. Good to see you. So proud of you. And Taylor and all of you on here. And it's good to see Serena back. And all righty. So hope to see all of you next week. There's my friend T from Seattle and Cora and all. So have a good rest of the week, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye. Love you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.